Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to another episode of the Tech Marketing Podcast. This episode, we will be joined by Siew Ting, who has written a brilliant book called Building Brands with Soul, a CMO playbook. We're going to be talking about that today. It is out, so you can order it right now. At any time in the podcast, you think, damn, this sounds like a good book. Hop online. It is called Building Brands with Soul, a CMO playbook. Sue, it is a pleasure to have you on the podcast. John, what did you think of my intro?
That was a great intro, but also, it's Siew Ting. This is the second time we've had you on the podcast. In fact, you left a lasting impression with me last time, being
He's a changed man.
Yeah, well, it has. It's something I've reflected on quite a bit about how a traditional, some of our traditional values as marketing haven't really changed, and I'm just so pleased that you're now sharing a lot of that with the world. So, welcome back to the podcast.
Thank you. I'm glad that I left a lasting and positive impression on you. So it looks like it's going to be another interesting one today.
Hopefully.
So tell us kind of what, last time we caught up, you were at HP. We were talking about how, essentially a lot of the metrics that we measure ourselves. I think we described you as a traditional brand Buddha. I think was some of the wording we used last time. But what's changed since we last caught up?
Well, I have spent a lot of time actually taking a break, really doing a lot of self-reflection on myself and writing a book. And this whole idea of writing a book purely comes from the perspective that I want to pay back to the community. I want to do my part on inspiring the next generation of marketing leaders. And then it's kind of like, I wish 10 years ago when I was not a CMO and aspiring to be a CMO that there is actually a playbook that I can really look at that really guide me along this journey. So I decided to write a book. And this book is really a summary and a collection of, my own journey of ascending towards the CMO role. It talks a lot about a topic that I'm absolutely passionate about, which is building brands with soul, but also leading with soul. Yeah.
So what does it really mean? You said building brands with soul, something that you're incredibly passionate about. What does building a brand with soul mean?
It's a fantastic question, and I think I get asked this quite often, and I always play back to people and ask them, so what's interpretation of soul? So why don't I start with that before I give you the answer? So John, what do you think about the word soul? What does it mean?
Oh, okay, you've reflected it straight back on me. Harry, you're always going to have something meaningful here, so I'm also going to just give you a warning. It's coming over to you straight after me, by the way, because I'm expecting something like incredibly insightful here, and deep. What does soul mean? For me, it's something. Humanizing isn't quite the right word, but it's non-analytical. It's emotional. It's kind of a combination of emotion, of our human feelings, if you will. But it's certainly not kind of your analytical, data-driven type approach that we talk so much about today. Like if I was to try and describe what soul meant, it would be that. It would be a feeling.
Some kind of intangible value that makes something beyond what it is that you see immediately, I suppose.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think both of you answered that part of the answer, which is, a brand with soul. It's something intangible in that perspective. I mean, we all connect with brands not on a functional level. I mean, we really connect with brands on an emotional level. And a lot of brands that are really iconic and has great values, and many of them I've worked for and worked with, they don't emerge from a company strategy or execution. They actually emerge from the people that worked on the brand, the employees that work on the brand, and also the leaders that worked on the brand by, doing the right thing for the business and for the brand, and really to, impact the society and humanity in a meaningful way. So for me, a brand and business with soul really lies back to that, and you can feel it, right? If a brand and a business is with soul, you almost can feel it, smell it. You can feel that intangible and then that spirit of it. Book, yeah, go ahead, Gary.
What are some soulful brands that spring to mind?
Both Same thing I was thinking.
I'll come to that.
Okay,
but the book actually talks about my own journey of building brands with soul, but also leading with soul.
Mm-hmm.
And the book cover, trying to get a copy of the book now. It actually has this ripple,
Oh,
No.
and this ripple sums up my own journey of leading and building brands with soul, because it starts from self mastery to team development and leadership, and then to brand, and then business impact. So the book encompasses that. Yeah,
I want to highlight that ripple because I've noticed it in some of the language that we were talking about beforehand, Siew Ting, which is and this was just so powerful for me. You mentioned, I'm going to read directly from your synopsis, but I just want to. I
sure.
thought this was so brilliantly and eloquently written. But a brand with soul not only enhances the bottom line and growth, but also provides a rippling positive impact that
Yeah,
echoes through the lives of customers, employees, and society at large. I mean, wow, like you're not wrong. I've thinking about Harry's question there are so many B2B brands that do that and so many that I think are missing it.
yeah,
So yeah, I think that just that really left an impression with me, this concept of you're leaving a legacy almost, isn't it?
yeah, yeah. Well, I had amazing opportunities to work with many iconic brands, and many of them are brands with soul. But I've also witnessed occasion when the brand with soul actually lost its soul. In that perspective, my pure objective of writing this book is not only to inspire the next generation of marketing leader, but also to ignite a conversation about leadership with
Mm-hmm.
soul. So it's almost like trying to light up the fire of every ripple
Yep.
in every one
Yep.
of you, and so that many ripples come out to really galvanize a community of and a conversation around leadership with soul.
we're lacking leadership with soul here in the UK.
Took it straight there, didn't you, Harry? Sorry, that took me by surprise.
We have some soulless leadership.
Yeah,
But I want to know what the brands with soul are. You tease me,
Yeah.
Sue.
Yeah. So I work for. Well, I literally counted how many brands I've worked with over my career of 2 decades in marketing. I think I've potentially worked with 30 global brands. But I would want to say that there's a brand that you guys will be very familiar with, that is absolutely amazing brand with soul. And I enjoyed my time working on it. It's Johnny Walker.
Yeah, that is a brand with soul.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean that is a brand with soul, because for me it takes 5 criteria on my own definition of what the brand with soul. It's anchored on a meaningful purpose, and then its purpose actually stay relevant with time. It keep changing according to the macro environment. I keep reinventing, and then the third thing is it has a meaningful impact on people's life. It connect with you on emotional level. It has amazing campaigns itself, and it comes out through the passion of the people that work on the brand, right? When you walk into Diageo, everyone loves Johnny Walker, from the leaders to the factory workers to the master blenders that you see in Scotland. And at the same time, it's absolutely consistent. You smell it, you feel it, you know the Striding Man icon, you know the bottle, you know the PT whiskey. It's absolutely consistent. You can feel its soul. So that's a great definition of a brand with soul.
It's 8:15 here, and I'm thirsty now for whiskey. That's pretty.
Yeah,
that's
but
a bad. That's a bad sign
That's
for the
you every
podcast.
day.
Yeah, that's
I
a
was
bad
going to
sign.
say that with Johnny Walker, one thing that sticks to me is the voice actors that they use. You could I could choose the voice actor. You could go, that is the wrong voice actor. And this reminds me of a podcast I did solo a while ago, Brands with Soul. I was talking about music as part of branding. So Intel has their dun, 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 that type of thing. And then the furthest reach of that, the furthest North Star of that, is when you can hear something and that sounds like the brand, as opposed to, a brand having an original sound. So like James Bond, if a song comes out and you hear it on the radio, you can go, that would be a great James Bond song or something like that.
Yeah.
But, there's lots of other brands you can go. But Johnny Walker, actually, you could say, hey, this would be good on a Johnny Walker advert if you hear that. So that's That's how I like it. If it can have music attached to it, which is one of the most soulful mediums, then I think
How
that's a good way to begin it.
One thing you mentioned a moment ago, though, Siew Ting, was that this concept that it's the leaders bring a lot of the soul, and with a brand, an established brand like Johnny Walker that's been around for, you're probably going to tell me now, like I'm going to say it's certainly
200?
over 50 years, like a
No, more
long
than
time,
that.
yeah, long
200.
time. Like how does it still retain the soul during that time period, and how do leaders make sure they're I'm going to say that good advocates for it as they take charge of a such an established brand?
I think managing and leading a global brand is not easy, to be really frank. And especially if it's a brand that is of great value to the business, a lot of people want to have a say in the brand. There's lots of opinions, but um, I would say that I mean, not none of the brands that I work on, or not, or neither Johnny Walker, but I've also seen brands, and one of the most iconic brand, which is I think quite talked about now over the last few months, is a brand that is amazing with soul, but it lost its pluck a little bit, it lost its soul. We guess what that brand is?
I'm going to probably say Nike. Yeah, like actually, we use this as a
How'd
case
you do
study.
that?
Because I used it. It's a strange thing, right? Actually, and I'm going to give credit to one of my team here because he actually wrote the talking points for me. But it's we used it as a case study at an event on data about how not to be data driven,
Yeah,
and why it's important. Because I think one of the key problems we've got today isn't that we haven't got the right data, is that we don't have the right people that can tell the right stories with it, that can understand it correctly, which comes down to your point of soul. Like from your perspective, like, and for Harry's benefit and all of our
Yeah, for
listeners'
my
benefit, if they
benefit.
haven't heard the case study, like what happened with Nike suiting?
I think four things that they did differently. They lost what it really stands for, because Nike is about performance, is about sports. So they almost lost its strong, unique purpose and unique differentiation, and they went generic. So they start classifying it into categories like women's and children's and everything. And the second, critical success factor was that the products matter. Their products, we buy Nike purely because of its product innovation, and it has great performing products, which goes back to its positioning
Mm-hmm.
about all about sports performance. But they start investing in innovation, and then there's lots of other players that came in with better products. And then the third thing was they went too much short term.
Yep.
Um, the entire just counting on direct to consumer channels versus
Mm-hmm.
seeing that as a platform, as a stage, and that people actually buy omni-channel. I mean, the whole direct consumer thing happened in COVID, and COVID was purely because it was a contextual issue. But they lost that, and they used that to project into the future because, and I think that pisses off lots of their channel partners itself. And then last but not least, perhaps they lost a bit of internal belief and internal challenge. I mean,
Mm-hmm.
one of the great examples is their recent campaign at Olympics. For me, I didn't quite thought it was pretty polarizing. I didn't quite thought that was really a Nike ad, right? Because I mean, brands that has, besides Johnny Walker and Guinness, I mean, Nike has the best ad ever. But when I saw the ad, I was like,
Mm-hmm.
hey, that's not recognizable as a Nike ad. So I think those were the few things that they make mistake. As a result, the valuation, I was reading an article today, 60% drop in valuation.
Yeah. I mean, you're talking like a top 10 brand here, probably a top 5 brand with Nike. Like losing their brand valuation like that is just. I mean, they found the errors of their ways, but one thing. And Siew Ting, you've worked on both the B2C side and the B2B side, so you're one of the few marketeers and CMOs that have made that jump. But it makes me, just the one comment you made about they thought too short term. I think every B2B marketeer should be looking at what's happened with Nike or Nike, depending on how you pronounce it, and be looking at that saying as a red flag for we've been focusing on demand gen and driving the importance of leads now in B2B for a long time, and we're starting to see that wane. But
Yeah.
because B2C businesses, I'm going to say something fairly controversial. The sales cycles are shorter. Essentially they're like the fruit fly to us, right? We can see changes faster. We can see evolution faster with a B2C brand like Nike. And so we should be looking at that and going and learning from it and applying it to our businesses as quickly as we can, I think. But great example. Like, what do you have any examples of B2B brands that you think have the most soul? Because I've got one in my head, but it's one
I
I
know
like
what
bringing up
that
all the
one
time.
is. He's going to say
What
Splunk.
what
I'm
is
going to
that?
jump in there before he does.
Yeah, go ahead, Harry.
Go ahead, Harry.
Splunk.
Splunk is. I will say, yeah, I will give you that one, but it wasn't the one I was thinking of.
Oh, damn. He's going to say Salesforce.
Yeah, it's going to be Salesforce.
Yeah, I'm going to say Salesforce too.
Because just partly because your comment around leaders, like I just think the brand embodies itself through all the leaders at Salesforce. And they do such an exceptional job of doing that, and also making sure they provide the ripple effects. Like I think they are the gold standard of how you do that at scale. So I mean, anyway. That brings us on to like a really important point here, I think, which is that for such an intangible item like brand, like how do you make sure that it creates that lasting value for business and on the bottom line? Like how do you blend that? How do you turn soul, which is something that is going to be incredibly difficult to talk to your board about, into something that's valuable to the company?
I think you still can't run away from data, and I still go back to the conversation that we had the last time, which goes back to the craft of marketing. It's still an art and science, but it's knowing when you actually use the science and use the data to tell your story, and knowing when you make decisions that is not 100% proven on data. At the end of the day, there's lots of methodologies that can prove the brand impact and the brand impact on valuation. And I would always use something that people in the industry has taught me, which is you link the brand value to ability to drive sustainable pricing power. So for me, brand is not something that you just go in and say you need 3 years to build, or you have to link back to something very substantial, which is the brand value, or your ability to keep raising price, or you keep the price at a certain level. So for me, that is where the data comes in, especially when you sell within the board and the leaders. That is extremely important on leading a brand. But then when you talk about the art of galvanizing everybody towards the entire conviction on what the brand stands for, and the passion and the narrative and from an inside out, that's not what data can help you. Data helps you, but that is more the conviction of the leaders, and that is where what I meant, the ripple effect comes into play, right? So it comes from yourself and your own conviction, and then how you pass your own conviction all the way down to your team, and then how the team helps galvanizes the entire organization together is going to be really critical.
I mean, that's a difficult task on its own, galvanizing an organization. Like what kind of what tips? This book is all around providing tips to aspiring marketeers. Very similar to this podcast, actually. It's but what tips can you give someone to how they might galvanize someone around a vision or a brand?
I think I'm not perfect. I'm actually still learning. So some of the tips that I have will be more like what I've learned and practiced and failed. It's what I would use my own version of 5 C's. So it's not a diamond, not 5 carat of 5 C's. Not in Singapore we have our 5 C's. It's my own version of 5 C's, which is one is conviction, having the conviction and to really sell a bold vision. Second is really courage. Having the ability to dream the impossible and have courage around that. Third, for me, that has helped me a lot is creativity, especially even how creative you are in selling a narrative. It's actually absolutely critical, especially when it comes to leadership. And then the fourth piece is really around community. So I'm a firm believer in community. I don't believe in
Mm-hmm.
hierarchy. I believe there is a top leadership level on stakeholder management that CMO needs to do. But then in order to translate that community and speed to market and speed to impact, and using the team's community power becomes absolutely important. And also defining what community beyond marketing, beyond the realm of marketing, is extremely important. And then the last piece is, really around commitment. So when you set your mind on something, you go and make it happen.
Those are really good C's. That's some of the finest
Yeah,
C's I've
I
ever
won't
heard.
bore you with Singapore C's, so they're too boring.
What are they around though? What are they
Material
concerned?
material things like car, credit
Carrots.
card, condo.
That
I
sounds
forgot
like
what
John
the other two are.
Busby's remit.
Why are there Singapore? Why does Singapore have C's compared to, like, I knew the diamond C's, like
It's
your
about
cut
dollar
clarity.
bills, baby.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's just what you define success, many
Got it.
years ago on what success looks like, and they call it the 5 C's. Yeah.
But I would say I think the biggest piece that stood out for me, and it's the one you spent the most time on as well. So I think it might be the biggest for you as well, Siew Ting, is that community element. And I'm, we're always the same here in our organizations, and how I try and lead my teams is there's no such thing as hierarchy. Like, it's that Toyota mentality of, if anyone can pull the red cord and stop the production line, or raise their hand and make a point, and it be just as valid whether you're the most senior person in the room or the most, you've only been here 2 days and you're the most junior. So, like, I completely agree with what you're saying there. That I think that community element is key to bringing everyone along. Like, how do you? But everyone, all of us in our careers have gone through and tried to launch a new brand.
Mm-hmm.
Doing it by community and by committee, another C, it can be quite time consuming. Like, how do you get through that and get everyone kind of aligned in the same
I'll jump
direction?
on the back of that as well, because is committed, when you talk about community, is that internal or external? Because I assumed external, but actually now John's making more sense by saying internal. But the best brands will have that external community, these evangelists that do it for them, but that's kind of a product of having a brilliant brand as opposed to a way to create one.
I would say my philosophy starts internal first, because if your internal employees cannot be your advocate, then things will fall through, right? Because now with social media, people can find out whether the company employees are really passionate about the brand. So that's where a lot of I've seen use case whereby, because there wasn't enough internal rally cry, that brands actually got into crisis. So I think it starts with internal, but then you also need to utilize external community to really drive that. And especially now with social media, a lot of the younger brands or brands targeted at youth, actually lives in community and lives in social media, right? Just look at how my little girl, she's 11, how she consumes brands. It's all through community and all through social media. So I think community externally is absolutely important as part of your strategy of marketing. But I think it has to start from internal first, and then it emanates externally.
But getting that alignment internally can be such a challenge, like, especially if you are doing it as a community. Like, have you got any tips on how you move through that quickly? How you define a brand or proposition without it feeling like a decision by committee?
Yeah, I think in the book, there is actually a chapter of how I talk a little bit about how I bring the community together. And it goes, and I have a framework around that, right? It goes back to, I always practice a framework whereby I align my own purpose, the team's purpose, each one of their purpose, and we go through a journey of, using that to align to the company and the brand's purpose. And then drawing that together to create a team goal or team manifesto and what we want to know for. So I think that process up front in terms of leading any team change and brand launches and everything is absolutely critical, because you can have the best strategy, but if it's top down and you're not winning the hearts and minds of the people who are working on it, it will fall flat. So I use that framework so far in a lot of the brand launches that I've been in, or transformation journey, and somehow it seems to work.
I couldn't agree more. Like I think there's a lot that, you know, just as you're talking through your approach in your book, you mentioned this term purpose earlier and being a purposeful CMO. And just then you mentioned about how you need to bring the team together and understand kind of each other's, and reading slightly between the lines there of your book, if you will, like I see that as understanding each other's values. So it's right back to kind of that purpose and value driven management, you know, exactly the same way that kind of, and I think of Built to Last, if you remember that book, like about how that you have to have that purpose that exists for the entire history of the company and never changes, and make sure that everyone's values are aligned to that. So I think it's just showing that it's even more important. But also, and I've had this conversation with a few other podcast guests recently, you know, that I think you've got to get to know the people in your team. You know, you've got to, we try and spend the first 5-10 minutes of every meeting actually not talking about work, so that we know kind of where we live and what the weather's doing and what and it sounds kind of a little bit unproductive, but I think as a leader, if you're not doing that, you can't align people's values and you can't put it in their terms. I think it's incredibly important. Did you have that kind of view of the firm, like that purpose view of the firm, when you were going through and thinking about your own frameworks?
Sorry, the question is?
Sorry, it was a bit of a long-winded question. Like, did you have that view of like purpose and values and vision almost as you were thinking about your approach to being a CMO?
Oh, it's a big part of my leadership strategy and my leadership values. So for me, whenever I go into a new role, even if I'm in the same organization but it's a different team, I always declare and letting people know who me beyond the transactional side of things. It's, you know, knowing me as a human being and who I am, what makes me tick, what doesn't make me tick, what's my purpose. So I always spend time letting people understand that first, and also it's reciprocal, right? So in the conversation, I want to know individuals on who they are, what their values, and through the conversation, I kind of know what their strengths are and what their potential is, and I tend to fit them into roles that brings out their potential. It might be uncomfortable for them, but actually it helps to stretch them. I mean, that's something that I always do in all the roles that I go to.
Like I actually couldn't agree more really to that. I think you have to, I came across this stat recently. I think you have to be 7% uncomfortable to keep pushing yourself. That's where you want to be. You want to, whether that's kind of in your exercise routine or you're getting faster running, or whether that's in your job, it needs to be 7% more difficult to be just difficult enough to stretch you. Taking this, coming back to kind of Harry, your question here, because we talked around internal community, but we also mentioned kind of external community. How can a brand create more significant societal impact? Like, what are your frameworks for measuring that, and how do you bring that into being a purposeful CMO?
I think it goes back to why the brand exists and what the brand exists to do, and what it wants to impact on, people's life. And each brand is different, depending on the strategy of the company.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, again, I use Johnny Walker and I use Guinness. Both of them are great brands, and Johnny Walker's purpose is very consistent. It didn't change for 200 years. It's about inspiring people's progress.
Okay.
That's why the keep walking line. That's why it's whiskey. It didn't change. It just stayed relevant. and it's not only just about producing great whiskey and people enjoying the whiskey. Through its marketing, it also, bring about a lot of different societal causes on really driving that impact. So it goes back to the brand purpose and the brand positioning and what the brand really wants to stand for. And I think underneath that has to go back to, it has to be anchored on a universal human truth that it's has enough tension and that travels across continents, and different culture and different culture. Yeah.
I'm talking like with Apple, you get the people who are Apple people. You're just never going to get them on Android, and Apple knows that, and they'll push it as well. Like when you receive a text from Android and stuff like that, they make it seem clunkier than it is. Like their emojis are all wrong, and when you try to link stuff, those green texts that you get from the Android people, they make them unpleasant, because they want you to see them as other, and you don't want to go over, leave this Apple community where you get all the cool texts and go over to the Android community. So it's stuff like that. You can have benefits and costs to keep a brand close knit. I don't know if alcohol has the same kind of effect on that, but I suppose trying to think of what other brands may do.
I think for me, actually, Harry, it's the bit that stands out most is that having worked on many brands and having, as part of a B2B marketing agency, we've created creative concepts. We've gone back and seen briefs. We've been trained on big brands. It's that many brands just are missing that purpose, like haven't truly defined like why they exist. And because I think there are so many examples where they just try and redefine themselves every few years or every change of leadership, and what that ends up doing is just creating a very fragmented experience or very disjointed experience. Like Siew Ting, from your side, like you've used Johnny Walker as a great example. Like, how did they embody that purpose in some of its marketing? Like, can you provide an example of where that came to life?
Well, I think one of the pitfalls of marketers is sometimes you get bored with your own work before the consumers get bored with it, and then they keep changing the campaigns behind it, or they change the positioning, and kind of people get really confused what that positioning is. I mean, for me, the Johnny Walker brand, the positioning doesn't change for 200 years. It didn't change. The Keep Walking line didn't change for many, many years from its time of its conception. The striding man it's really there. But what changes is how the progress is being defined according to different culture. Like progress in China is slightly different from progress in the Western world, right? So the communication and the cultural aspect of it becomes more relevant, not only just from a language standpoint, but also from the stories that are being told itself. And also the product liquid doesn't change. It's always bold PT, but the innovation evolves. So, over the course of the last 10 years, there was this whole, for example, in Asia, there was, and Western world, in the duty free, there was a big gifting, need. There was people are willing to pay more for, customized packs, right? And then you start seeing in the duty frees, really great collaborations of, customized packs with different, brand partners. And even in China, that I was part of the journey, we actually created very, very high end, Johnny Walker products, but we customized it because there was just a need for the target audience. They're willing to pay more for that. So I mean, in this example, you will see what changes and what doesn't change. So I think it's a fine balance between for the brand leaders to really drive that.
Yeah. Like let's move on now to kind of the role of the CMO a little bit. as well, because I think let's bring that into it. In your book, you talk about this concept of a Da Vinci CMO. Like, can you explain? But let's start. What is a Da Vinci CMO? Like, what does that mean?
So first, to qualify that didn't come from me. Actually, that came from a program that I was part of 3 years ago. So I was part of the top 100 global CMO of this, program, but called Institute for Real Growth. And it was founded by, two amazing guys. And in fact, one of them actually wrote the foreword of my book, Frank. In that program, they did a piece of work. They partnered with Spencer Stewart, and they started around the world, what makes a great CMO. And they look at 10 skill sets and also 5 attributes of what great CMO looks like. And they call it the Da Vinci CMO. And within this framework, there's both the art and science and, aspect of a CMO. Maybe they call it Da Vinci purely because, Leonardo da Vinci is an amazing craftsman and he creates great masterpiece. So that's the concept of the Da Vinci CMO in itself. Yeah.
This concept of art, science, and humanism, isn't it?
Yeah.
They come together. And I'm not going to pretend to know that I'm not going to pretend to be classically trained on the Renaissance period during that period of history. But I can certainly see just from my knowledge of just how he painted some of the biggest masterpieces, but also invented a lot of things. So that's kind of what we want to bring together, is that art, science, but also most importantly that humanism.
Yeah.
Like, how, as a CMO, how should you try and integrate those three? Like, where do you get started, I guess, with knowing which ones to dial up and dial down?
I don't think I have a perfect model around that, but I think in the Da Vinci framework there was 5 traits which I thought articulates the role of a CMO really well and what great CMOs need to have. I'm still learning, and the 5 traits are: 1, you need to be a great collaborator. So that means you need to play the role in the C-suite as an integrator and a collaborator. That's absolutely critical. If you're not, you won't succeed in the CMO. The second piece is being a courageous and inspiring storyteller.
Mm-hmm.
Marketeers needs to be storyteller, but to do that with conviction. I mean, some of the great CMOs globally well known, they are amazing, courageous storyteller, and they have so much conviction. The third piece is, really driven from this perspective of this notion. They call it the servant leadership, which I'm a big believer of the servant leadership. I talk a lot about it in my book. And then the fourth piece, which is around speed and impact success. Mm-hmm. Especially in the current world now, you need to know when you use science and when you make decisions, when you don't overanalyze, and because things move very quickly, the speed and impact is so critical, especially with technology. And then the last piece is really, what is the last piece? I forgot what the last piece is. Agility.
Yep.
Yeah.
Which we know is absolutely important, especially with the way technology is coming fast and furious. Yeah.
There's so much there that I want to dive into, which we're not going to have time to do the whole thing. But you mentioned like difference between being a storyteller and a courageous storyteller, telling story with conviction. Like, what is a courageous storyteller?
Courageous storyteller is you really believe in the brand and you believe in doing the brand not because of the marketing campaign you're creating, but using the brand to galvanize the entire organization through transformation. And I did that many times in my career, because I believe that a brand with purpose can actually drive transformation. So elevating your speech is very important. The other piece which I learned through trials and error is don't underestimate the importance of storytelling, especially during transformation journey.
Oh, okay.
How do you create a simple story that don't scare the shit hell a lot of people, but inspire people, but yet make it so simple that people are not afraid.
Yeah.
As humans, we are creatures that don't like change. So how encouraging your story is, and how people want to jump onto the bus, you know, and how you make it simple for people is and motivating for people is so critical.
Have you got any examples of where you
Yes.
did that? Because I think that's, you know, actually having spoken from someone that's taking a business through a transformational journey at the moment, that's one of the key things that we focus on. I have a very different way of articulating it, but have you? What's an example of where you've taken a brand on that transformational journey?
Well, actually, more from a team, from a transformation will be, you know, I think brands has many examples, but a team on transformation, and I use storytelling to really create that, is I like to bite-size things, and I like to use simple stuff that means something, but yet people can create a compelling platform for people to change. So in my second stint back as the Asia Pac CMO in HP, and I think that was a moment that maybe we caught up during then, or I can't remember. I had to create a compelling vision of what the marketing organization really stand for, and that was really stuck into COVID period. And the people really needed to feel their value a little bit. So we came together as a team, and it wasn't purely my effort. I brought the team together, and we brainstormed, and we did workshops and everything, and we create this, what we call that the Asia Pac marketing team is all about magic. It's all about creating magic. And each one of the word magic means something. So M stands for mastery of brand. A stands for agility. G stands for growth and growth mindset. I stands for integration. So marketing can't be doing things on its own. In fact, we need to play an active role to integrate the 4 Ps. And C stands for customer centricity. So those were the, you know, and we are all about creating magic because we are your trusted business partners. So that was the positioning that the marketing organization had within the corporation, but how we work with the other function. And that was so easy because it not only create a compelling narrative to my business partners and external functions, it also helped the team elevate themselves. So they then become really clear that, okay, I need to do these 5 things in order to become more competent and to perform better. And these are the skill set that, and then in the journey, obviously, I had training and, you know, whatever to help them with, you know, with requiring new skill set. So that's an example of creating a compelling narrative.
That is, it is. Well, I might steal that that acronym because I think that is magic, and also it works so well in technology. You know, technology when it is true innovation does look like magic at the moment. So I think that's can be used in so many different ways. But I think for many businesses now, and I'm going to try not to use the word that we've used on every podcast for the last 2 years. But you know, we're obviously going through a lot of change at the moment and a lot of transformation. I think that just is something that hits really. It's really important to make sure that you are a good storyteller, that you can tell a compelling journey of how everyone in your team needs to get there, but like you say, without scaring them. So, you know, let's kind of talk around. Let's kind of go back to basics for a second. Also back to kind of what the book is there to talk about, which is, as an aspiring CMO, like, what advice would you give them in order to start to cultivate this mindset? Like, let's say you've just been directed to your first VP position, or maybe even just senior director position in a marketing organization. Like, what advice would you give to that person wanting to aspire to be a CMO?
Well, in my book, there is a part, the third part, which actually is summed out as Friday emails. So those are the Friday emails that I write to my team. But I don't think I can remember all the 10 tips, but I actually wrote 10 stories of 10 leadership tips that you should have a look at the book itself. But then if I go back to the advice, again, it goes back to my philosophy on the ripple effect. So starting with yourself, knowing yourself, knowing your purpose, but don't stay really curious and and constantly reinvent yourself. So for me, and get yourself uncomfortable will be where I think it has to start from there. And I think I'm a big believer of CMOs doing three things. One, you need to dream big. You need to have a bold vision. Two, when you have a bold vision, it's just not about talk, it's about making it happen. And then third is, one, you have the right people on the bus and the right plans and the right stakeholder. You execute with agility. Um, so that's my three advice, right? And obviously the skills and everything is all in the Da Vinci CMO framework.
I think that's really important to start with yourself. Like, you've got to start, and now we're coming, this podcast will go out just before, in December, as we're coming up to the new year. And one thing that I do at the beginning of each new year is I spend a bit of time reflecting on what I've achieved and where I haven't achieved my goals. And
has a
what I
bottle
want
of
to
Johnny
change.
Walker.
Yeah, and probably over a bottle of Johnny Walker. Yeah, I am getting I'm getting a bit of a thirst on. That's probably not something to admit for 9 o'clock on a Tuesday morning. But Siew Ting, one thing I'm really interested here, and as marketeers in marketing, especially at the moment where we're all talking about how you need to give value back to your audience. I think this is something you talk about in your book as well. I do think we're kind of having all of us are struggling to generate valuable content, and are relying a little bit too much on some of the newer fangled methods. Again, I'm not going to try and use those two words to generate it. Like, what advice would you give as an aspiring CMO to be able to, as you've been on this journey to create this book, like, how has that journey been? Like, how have you carved out the time to make it happen? And what advice would you have for anyone that wants to share? Yeah, in creating their own content, because I think we're very good at talking, but we're not very good at creating like new elements like this that really help to define new frameworks or shift our thinking. So what advice would you have for someone to get started and write their own book?
Write their own book?
Yeah.
Write their own book?
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure.
Well, this is
everybody
should
write their own book.
Yeah. But like, has it been an easy journey for you to be on? Like, what? Because I don't think we're creating enough content, and certainly enough customer valuable content in all of our industries. And here you are with a fantastic journey of what you've been on, but also some tips that you're hopefully going to share to help CMOs. Like, how did you get started on that journey to create this masterpiece?
To be frank, it was on my bucket list for a very long time, and I kind of just sat on it for a while. But it was triggered by my husband, who obviously planted the seed in my mind early this year. And then I realized I had a lot of content because I write Friday emails to my team without fail for a year. So I sat on a lot of content. And because of that, once I set my mind on it, I just kind of create space for myself to, write it. And obviously in the journey, I had some help, right? I had a book coach. She helped me. She gave me an ideas around it. And I absolutely, totally empathize with creative now, because I became a craftsman myself. And I find that the process of creating things is not so easy. You kind of take 2 steps forward and then you take 1 step backward, and then you get stuck in itself. But I would recommend anyone to do it, because it was a fantastic journey of testing patience, testing my grit. It was also a fantastic journey of self-reflection, because I reflected on what my own 25 years of career, what I've been things that I'm very, very grateful about, but things I can do better. yeah, and then last but not least is a bit scary. I'm kind of like sharing my voice out there. I'm putting myself out there because I wanted to share and inspire the next generation of marketing leaders. It is a little bit of a scary journey, but I think the response I'm getting now is actually quite encouraging.
I mean, I can't. We'll talk more about the book release in a second. Firstly, I also want to just highlight the fact you used the term grit there as well,
Yeah.
because as I was reading kind of some of the excerpts from the book that you sent us for this podcast, this concept of soul for marketing, I was being akin to kind of like how grit is to perseverance. Like, and if anyone's familiar with grit, it's like this essentially this term that, well, we use it a lot nowadays, but Angela Duckworth, I think, defined it between that combination of passion and perseverance. And I think you're kind of doing the same with soul here, right? It's the combination of art and science and humanity. So, you know, I did think you've almost created that model for marketing, which is absolutely brilliant. Thank you for sharing that story with us there, because it's something, you know, I do think as marketeers we need to share more. Like those Friday emails are you know, an inspiration to me. I used to do something very similar as well with my team. And I got told that I wrote very long emails and nobody really read them at the time. But that's because I was also writing them to developers, and we are a unique bunch. So, Siew Ting, when is the book, just for our listeners, when is the book coming out and how can they get hold of it?
It's open for pre-order now, but it will be available on 22nd of November, which is a couple more days, in both ebook and also the physical book.
Although you don't get to see the ripple effect if you buy the ebook version, so I might have to get both versions.
Is there any is that like 423 hertz or whatever it is, that ripple, or did you put a lot of thought into it? Because there's in some of my more esoteric circles on the internet, they actually are quite particular about which ripples they use. It's all about like the different vibrations and stuff.
I think we need to have that conversation over a pint of Guinness or a glass of whiskey.
Exactly that.